Hello dear students, today my topic is the Bhopal Disaster, the philosophical contribution. A sense philosophical inquiry is vital to any considered discussion since it can help us understand the nature of business and arrive at moral judgments. As philosophy literally, the love of wisdom is hard to pin down as an academic activity. It embraces fundamental and abstract questions about human nature and our relationships, the meaning of language, and how we establish and implement our values. However, at the most basic level, philosophy has two primary functions: the examination of concepts as the study of arguments. Philosophy is unlikely to be able to transform hard questions into simple ones, and in fact may only be able to illustrate the complexity and nuanced nature of moral questions. The Bhopal Disaster underscores the difficulty in fully analyzing ethical issues in business and the number of factors to be considered. Since the facts of individual cases can be highly significant, in Bhopal, circumstances set the stage and a series of problems came together to make the gas leak as widespread and deadly as it was. Since there are many stakeholders with widely varying interests in the case, and many of them are incompatible. Since some commentators will emphasize the perceived difference between legal and moral responsibility, the acceptability of risk, and the nature of compensation. Since there are diverse cultural expectations that have complicated them issues, as well as tensions between rich developed nations and poor developing ones. The Bhopal Disaster. Since we also have to think about the long-term effects of business activity, although the incident happened decades ago, its damage to human health and the polluted environment continue to affect the region. Instrumental and prudential approaches. As we can also think about morality in terms of intrinsic and instrumental motivation, those holding intrinsic views believe good should be done for its own sake. Since instrumentalists would take the action that results in some form of personal benefit whether or not it is also the good thing to do. Since the technical term for following the moral path because of an anticipated benefit is prudence, prudential benefits need not be immediate. Rule-based approach is a belief often associated with the economist Milton Friedman is that the moral requirements of business are fulfilled simply by following the law. In fairness, this view also calls on firms to adhere to the moral norms of society, but for the sake of argument we can assume from this belief that the law is not only the ethical threshold but also its ceiling. This may mean emitting greenhouse gases, polluting, or not disclosing relevant information in order to facilitate deals, so long as it is not clearly illegal to do so. Ethics and the law. Since there is a temptation in life and in business literature to use the law as a moral template, in the sense that following the law is considered to be morally sufficient, with the implication that if we have done nothing illegal, then we have done nothing wrong. Since while we must admit that abiding by the law is a good start, it shortchanges the essential dialogue needed to establish appropriate standards and responses. Ethics and legislation are not symmetrical, and we can see this by considering cases that are either legal but immoral. The watchword of rule-based systems is compliance. Minimally, compliance means making sure that the law is followed. Many companies have tried to institutionalize ethics by generating a code of conduct that lays out acceptable and sanctionable behavior. Principle-based approaches as moral considerations are thought of in more general and abstract terms. Since the benefit is that when a novel issue arises people will have a point of reference from which to work. Since a principle-based approach is likely to require additional resources for training and discussion rather than strict adherence to simple directives. Since one of the chief difficulties with a rule-based approach is that it does not deal well with new or difficult issues where it is unclear what rule should apply. Ethical relativism. The theory that there are no ethical standards that are absolutely true and that apply or should be applied to the companies and people of all societies. Objections to ethical relativism. Since some moral standards are found in all societies, since moral differences do not logically imply relativism, since relativism has incoherent consequences, since relativism privileges whatever moral standards are widely accepted in a society. Integrative social contracts theory. Since integrative social contracts theory indicates that since hypernorms should apply to people in all societies, since microsocial norms apply only in specific societies and differ from one society to another. ISCT claims that hypernorms take priority over microsocial norms, that is, Microsocial norms must not contradict hypernorms. If a microsocial norm violates a hypernorm, then it is unethical and should be rejected. Nevertheless, ISCT assumes that hypernorms must allow every community to have some moral free space. Moral free space consists of the range of norms that a community is free to accept because they do not violate any hypernorms. Egoism. Since a major challenge to developing an ethics of business is posed by ethical egoism, an egoist would say that we rightly put our own interests and concerns above those of others, regardless of external ethical standards. Since in contrast, ethical altruism suggests there are times when we do good purely for its own sake, perhaps by anonymously donating to charity or volunteering in the community. Since current advocates of egoism often appeal to the works of major historical figures, Niccolò Machiavelli, 1469–1527, and Thomas Hobbes, 1588–1679, as well as the more recent work of Ayn Rand, 1905–82, and her book The Virtue of Selfishness, 1964,